Hello there, and welcome back to our Orlando time-lapse series. In today's episode we follow up very naturally with the next building, besides the two buildings that we created in the last episode. So the first thing that we have to achieve right here is, as always, guessing the right proportion and scale. Now, since this main street is of course a street, it's very straightforward. All those buildings are directly connected to each other. This comes especially handy when you are creating a recreation. Literally every building element that you place down, it kinda becomes a new reference point for later on. So every building element that you see on this brickwork building on the left, they becoming now the reference that I'm using in order to guess here the right proportion and scale on all those new elements that I'm just placing down right here. And again, this logic backfires then when we are later on the corner building next to the right here. So you see, everything that we are creating just in this very moment here will be used later on to create something else. Every little action that we are taking right here will at some point have a concrete consequence. The question is only how big this consequence will be. I mean, it's all the time different. When you are working on a super minor detail right here, it doesn't really matter at the end if it's there or not. But if you have to define a certain roof height or a super important detail directly on the center of a building, then I would say if that thing is not in the right form or shape or whatever, it not only looks visually wrong, but it kinda spirals you down into accepting and believing in wrong proportions. That will have a consequence later on all the things that you are doing then. So I don't know. I mean, all those things, they sound very reasonable, but in the very moment as I'm creating all those things right here, I'm of course not actively thinking of them. It's much more of a feeling thing, I would say. Whenever you are creating something here, mostly your inner gut feeling already tells you, wait, this is too big or this is too small, you can make this thing a little bit tinier or wider, and most of the time you kinda get away with that and it works out fine. But at certain points, especially in the beginning of constructing a building, you just have there things where you can't really cheat yourself around it, you know. You have to make the extra effort in getting those measurements right. Later on, when you are then in the process of detailing, you can totally relax there, because you don't have to be stressed out about by knowing in the back of your mind that the proportion is all wrong and over. No, you know you spent there enough precaution in the first place that you can fully focus now. And I think the result will also look just way better. Not only because you have the proportion and shape all right, but especially since you don't have to try hard all that much. You don't have to make it look really good, it just looks good by nature, just by putting those elements in the right way and form makes at the end the visual of this building. Now when I'm coming to our building right here, I really have to say it's one of my personal favorites in this entire main street. On one side you have this really great color scheme that makes it stand out from the buildings around it, but at the same time you have this very Renaissance-related architecture style that features here so many different elements of that period. Maybe that's the reason, I just don't know, but it kinda works on me. Now another thing that you will notice here very prominently, like on all those other buildings before it, it's very symmetrical. We had this topic already, that it's kinda creepy almost, that not only every building that we have created until here is symmetrical, but I would say 99% of all buildings in the history of humankind is. And back then we came to the conclusion that there has to be an intrinsic logic behind that. Whether it's just by practicality reasons of using the same window on another place on a building, or because it kinda harmonizes with us as humans. Since we as very biological creatures have a symmetrical body as well. We have 2 eyes, 2 hands, 2 legs, right? And so maybe there's more to it than only the visual of it, but something that lies beneath the surface that predefined us in our nature. And maybe that's kinda influencing us subconsciously in designing all those buildings in a symmetrical logic. Now, as you know, I'm not that religious in any way, but at least I believe that there has to be something that was not only before you existed in this world, but also after it. So this is of course a complete huge topic that we might tackle in another episode. But I think there has to be something at least, because why would nature bother otherwise? I mean, everything that you see, every creature that you know in this world looks symmetrical. When it comes now to architecture or literally everything that a human is creating, it's also a definition thing. I mean, where do you defining now when something is symmetrical or not? When you take a look on a tree, for example, you would say this tree looks not symmetrical, but when you see it under a microscope, then you would say, oh wait, it's actually symmetrical. Or something similar to that right here on this building, you would say this building looks symmetrical. But when you take the entire main street, you would say this whole main street isn't symmetrical, or only partly. So you can kinda find there very, I would say, ironic situations where you have both things happening. It's also the thing when you take, for example, your hand in front of you. By itself, it's far from symmetrical, but when you take then your second hand to it, it suddenly makes sense then. So in a way, it's extremely weird to me why it happens on places and on other places not. But the one thing that I can state here, the fact that literally every building that you have here in this park is symmetrical by nature, it helps us tremendously in doing this whole recreation. For example, on this building, I only have to make up the logic on one half of it, because later on I will just copy over everything from left to right. And in that way I save so much more time and effort than if this thing would be not symmetrical. I mean, when I talk about that right now, I can't even imagine what a non-symmetrical version of this building would look like. Once you place down something, you can't really use it anywhere else on this building. And even when you just take this one element, it's also in a way already symmetrical, predefined by itself, even if it's only a square piece. And so the only possible way of how you can achieve something non-symmetrical looking would be to define or limit your own interpretation of what is symmetrical. If you see it from a microscopic perspective, it's impossible. But when you see it from a macro level and saying, okay, this whole building arrangement that we have here, like this main street, in its compilation, it looks non-symmetrical. Now, a part of how you define symmetry, I think you can clearly tell that each building gets affected by it. It's no accident. It's a very clear design decision that gets even emphasized on top of it by having there something in the very focal point of each building. On every facade that we have built so far, you could see this happening. Just by having there something in the very midpoint of each building that is either bigger sized or stepping in the fore or background, or just like here where you have a rounded element, it makes the symmetry even stronger. You could kinda say it celebrates now this symmetry. Now at this point you could of course ask the question, why? Why spend there so much intention and attention to the very midpoint on each building? I mean, clearly you had some inspirations from the past and how they back then would design a Victorian-styled main street in that period. Maybe this why that I'm trying to get around here comes accidentally by just doing something very similar to what you would see like in that period. But still I would say there has to be more to it. I mean, it's no accident that this entire theming that we have here is part of this whole entrance area. When you want to enter this park as a guest, you have to walk through this. There's no other way around it. So in a way, they want to force welcome you in this very American traditioned style that celebrates this culture, this American way of life. And when I would have now to describe the effect on those buildings that I'm seeing here, so kinda the psychology that it has on me, then I would say because they are so very symmetrical and you have all those emphasis on the midpoint, they transpire a certain confidence and strength and authority, almost a kind of boldness. Look at me, here I am. I present to you in all my glory, and I'm proud by celebrating this Americanism. Now, if buildings could speak, that's more or less what I think they would kinda say to me. But when you see it from the perspective of a park design, it makes extremely much sense. You have all those buildings right here in the entrance, because they are literally the first thing that will people see. And even more so, they are kinda getting forced here into seeing them. But I'm a true believer that every building that you're seeing here evokes a certain emotion. And this emotion will transpire to the guest later on. So let's imagine we have the exact opposite. For instance, a building arrangement that evokes in us a sense of insecurity or shyness or darkness or shadiness. Then people wouldn't be so fine in entering this area, except they are exactly looking for it. But wouldn't you agree that it's so much better to have their bold and confident area that welcomes you warmly as you are on your way to all those other areas? I think most people, when they going through the main street, they aren't really realizing this. But I think it happens on a subconscious level, where it just feels great to be in that area. Even if you are on the look for a far different ride in a completely different area. But just because you have it here in the background, it gives you that level of immersion and confidence that sparkles your interest. And I think that's the most important thing in a theme park, that you get so immersed here that you lose there the sense of reality. All of your everyday carries and botherings, you finally can let them go here. You're almost becoming a child again. This intrinsic curiosity that lives in you can finally pop out again. But if it wouldn't be for this main street right here, you wouldn't really get into that mental state. So to conclude now this topic, for me this entire main street is in a way the very secret source of this whole experience. And therefore it makes sense to emphasize this area, especially with an architecture style or theming that is not only in line with the ideals of America, but also presents itself in a very proud and honest, confident, strong mentality that hopefully transpires all those different emotions to us as we visit this place. So at this point we might come now to the construction process of this building. As I said earlier, the layouting or proportion thing was relatively quickly set. You have here those 4 columns that divide this whole facade into 3 areas, left, right and middle. And after that was set, it's just continuing on those details. Now on this building you have a relatively minimalistic color scheme on it. Most ornamentations are in white and everything else is pretty much in this minty green in the background. Now to further emphasize this minimalistic look, I thought that I would only use now art pieces wherever I could here. When you take the reference image here, you can see that there isn't really that much texture on the wall. Literally every surface that you see is in a way smooth. I mean, okay, when you are in the park and really get up close, you see it's some form of plaster. But the effect when you are a little bit more far away is, at least to me, it's a super smooth facade. It's not like on the left where you have this brickwork and you have kind of this feeling of graininess and texture. But right here it's in a way inverse. Later on, I won't spoil you now, but later on we get to certain buildings in this main street that share different materials next to each other as well. I think it makes sense to make a main street or arrangement of buildings so much more diverse and interesting to look at when they are different in their material. Later on we constantly have this happening, changing from plaster to wood to stone and vice versa. I think you would lose here so much uniqueness about all those different buildings if they would all share the same wall material. So just by changing the material or the texture or even the color on a building, it already sets a complete different mood or feeling. Now so far, when you look on the progression on this building, the entire upper part is already finished. So we are in the middle of starting on the basement, you could say. And I tell you, this basement, it really frustrated the hell out of me, since you have this curved vaulting or arc behind it. I don't know, maybe you were already in a Gothic cathedral, then you probably saw it on the very ceiling there, where you have like 4 parts that go into each other, and you have to construct pretty much this crossing edge, where it's not only curved, but now you have to make them also in the right anglement. And the extra cherry of difficulty on top of that is that the one arc that we have in the middle gets of course emphasized. It's bigger than the ones that we have left and right. And it's really hard for me to even explain it right here. You will just see it here for yourself in a couple of minutes. But this entire process, it almost made me rage quit. It's not so much that you could theoretically imagine how this would look like and how you would kinda construct it, but the in-game tools of Planco are just not meant to be used for that. I'm not saying that you can theoretically do something like that. I mean, I do it myself in a couple of minutes, but the fact is just you have to try ultra hard here. And so I was wondering why it's so hard. I mean, the gizmo thing that we have to place every object down here, that's a super useful tool that we have. But when you are working on a much more complex structure here, where you have a lot of pieces that are very similar to each other in a condensed space, you lack there the ability to select them in an effective manner. So later on you will see that, for example, to create this vaulting there, I have to manually select and deselect there hundreds of times, only to have then those ones selected that I want. And so for literally every change that you have to do on a building here, you first have to select it. And this process of selecting something in this game is, at least in my opinion, very tedious or kinda slow. I mean, to be fair here, for most purposes it works great and it's pretty straightforward, you just select it and then you go. But for anything a bit more advanced, where you, as I said, work in a much more condensed space, you would need their tools that make your life much easier. So something like a filter. Only select those pieces that have a certain color, a certain degree, or of a certain kind. Then I would have much easier time of selecting those ones that I also really want to select here. But maybe the biggest time savior here would be some kind of folder structure within one scenery group. Then you could actually lock certain items in those folders, or even select all of them with just one click, because that's, for me at least, the thing where I spend most of my time in a very ineffective manner of just selecting each element that I want to modify manually. There is simply no automation, and that's kinda lacking. But again, this comes only from the perspective of a heuristic builder. I mean, I never play this game as it is intended to be played like, and so most people probably won't care about that. They much more care about new scenery themes, which I also care about. But when I see how much time I really lose in all my efforts of placing things down here, it kinda makes you think. And so roughly here we are exactly at the time where I have to go through all of those different elements and creating now those vaultings. And if I'm honest, I probably could have evaded this spot and kinda simplify it in its construction. But at this point, since I'm so in awe with this whole building here, I thought, doesn't matter at this point, just do it. But I feel like that's what you need to do sometimes. Regardless of how challenging or straining or bothering it is, you just have to stick to it and do it. So for instance, on this vaulting, once I was at this exact stage where I was shortly before rage quitting, I came to this mental state of choosing there two possible ways in how to continue this park. Either stop it, quitting this game, and saying, well, I finish it on another day, by at the same time knowing that I'm absolutely not sure if I am capable of doing it, and if I even have the motivation to get back into this game at that point, knowing what awaits me. Or I'm saying, absolutely not. I stick now with it, regardless of how hard or bothering it is to create. Once I have it, I have it. And that's the sole reason why I'm doing it. The next time I start up Planco, I'm knowing, okay, this spot is finished. I can continue on complete different things that are maybe 10 times easier than this. And so I think you kinda see what I'm on with that. The element of forcing you when times get really tough and where your lack of enjoyment stays in conflict with your own passion, it will make you much more stronger after it. Surely it's great to have this building in place, and knowing the next time you start a Planco, you can work on something else, but the fact that you had there enough willpower in you to force you against your own nature, that's I think the valuable lesson that we can learn out of it. It not only makes you physically and mentally much stronger whenever you are in such situations, but the more times this kinda happened, you know how to react to that. It's not a question of if you are able to do it, it's rather how are you gonna react in the right way when those instances occur. So in my belief, and to also conclude on this topic, once you have found this one solution that works for you, you can build literally everything. It's only a matter of time and patience in the end. So at this stage we might talk about something completely different as we further constructing this vaulting right here. In my perception, so for the last 6 weeks or pretty much since the last year, we did not really hear anything about Frontier, or it kinda got awfully silent about them. And especially for Planco right now, or the whole community in general, it feels kinda awkwardly silent. Now, I know it's their usual update routine where they provide another update or DLC literally in intervals of 3 months to each other. And you of course need that time in order to get things running effective and to have then also something that you can show us. That is not only in the stages of conception, but it's already a finished product that you can sell to us. That is hopefully worthwhile our money. But at the very same time, I can't evade in saying it feels kinda awkwardly quiet about them. And even if that is justified in some sort, it's just the way how it feels. So this seasonal update routine, let's call it, on the one side I like it because I think it gives the developer enough time to provide their content that is valuable and that is not only just a hotfix, but at the very same time, you can kinda rely on this cycle, right? You can be assured that at the end of the year you have 4 new updates that entertain you throughout those different seasons. But as I said, at the very same time, you kinda have this awkward feeling that in the meantime, there is barely anything happening. I think this comes mostly from the lack of showcasing the game on a regular basis. It's only on the exact same moments when they bring out something new. I mean, you have there some shorts in between, but they mostly only show there already stuff that we know about. What I would rather expect to see here would be some kind of interaction with the community, maybe a live stream or longer form videos that at least give a partly insight behind the development of this game. They wouldn't have to be in the same high quality of what you would usually bring out, but imagine a casual talk about the development of this game where they maybe talk about the art direction or the game engine. And the goal of that would be not to achieve their somewhat higher goal of having a super high quality marketing of this game. It's just there to showcase people, hey, we are there and we are working on it. And this would already erase all speculations and misconceptions about them. I mean, on a regular basis I see questions on Reddit or on Steam asking for when are they going to provide another update, and is this a game dead, or are there even players anymore playing it? You kinda get a sense of, wait, did they abandon this game? And you know, all those things could be kinda prevented when you just would have there, on a regular basis, some form of FAQ that is maybe only 15 minutes long, but it kinda helps in understanding and informing those guys are still on it. After all, if you break it down, all that work that you are kinda putting in those updates and DLCs, you have to be absolutely convinced that all that effort is absolutely worth it in the end, and that there are enough people that are going to buy it. And this implies, of course, that you have people there that not only have the game, but also new players that have to know of the existence of this game in order to first buy it. And that's just a thing that is currently lacking, at least in my opinion, that could be solved in a lightweight and budget-friendly, easy way by having there some sort of a FAQ, so that you at least get the impression or illusion almost that you are kinda part of the development of this game. Certainly, they won't going to show you everything. Let's be very clear about that. You would only see their little bubble that you would be allowed to see, but at least that would be enough so that you at least have the feeling, that's great, I know now more than I knew before, and I'm kinda excited about what will come then in the next update. I mean, that's another thing. Once an update drops, as it usually does, it will happen in a very immediate, surprising way. Previously, you hadn't any clue what it's about, but suddenly you see literally everything about it. So the level of excitement about something is going from absolute 0 to like 200. Now, this can of course be absolutely great for people that are completely in line with this update, when they, for example, like the scenery theme within it. But literally everybody else that is not completely convinced by it will quickly lose the interest into the game, or they are just not going to bother. That mentality of, let's say, the consumers here, that's not really going to work really with your DLC policy. When your primary goal is to support the game and your development of the game through those DLCs, then you want as much people as you can get here that are going to buy it. And so I'm in the belief, when you have there a much more linear excitement phase before you release this DLC or update, it already draws in or attracts so much more people that are also in line with this DLC or update. And I think that's exactly what you want. You want to attract people that are in line with your DLC, because, you know, people are different. We all are very subjective by nature. Some people prefer a pirate theme over a medieval theme, and then there are also other ones that are going to prefer a sci-fi theme over a spooky theme. So you have to be aware that you can't make it right to literally everybody out there. Some are going to like what you bring out and some not. But when you advertise what you bring out then in the future already before it, then you at least can attract all those people that are truly in line with what you are going to present then. And so that's also my reasoning why a surprising release of a specific theming doesn't really make sense in the end. I mean, sure, it's great to have there's something surprising about that because it elevates this feeling of seeing something new in the very moment as you first see it, but this will quickly fades away. But the long-term motivation of keeping players in this game comes only by displaying them what they can expect to see in this game. I mean, how long do you want people to wait here until they finally see the scenery theme they always dreamed about? I mean, that's not going to happen, because people are, as I just said, so very different. And so therefore, regardless of what DLC or scenery theme you are working on, it only makes sense then to advertise that given pack in some form in beforehand. This doesn't imply at all that you completely have to show everything that you have created there, but at least a tiny itch of something. Already that would have at least some sort of an effect on people. Even before they would buy now this thematic theme or DLC, they could start on different ideas or transitionings in their own park that would kinda prepare for this new addition in like 3 months from now. And that's really something I think is underestimated. When you have then there's something to work towards, then there's already so much more motivation in doing that. If you don't have there any particular goal where you want to be in a couple of months from today, then there's also no reason why you should now expand the park. So instead, if they would give out now a couple of hints where you might guess a specific scenery theme, then you could already prepare your park in advance for that. It not only hypes you up for the occasion when then this update will drop, but it actually triggers you to start up the game, to get back into building. After all, that's the most important thing. When you have there again a reason to play this game, everything becomes so much more easier. So at this stage we almost finished now this building here, and especially the fact that you have there so many different rounded elements that make up this facade makes it something very unique in our main street. So as I doing here some last little additions that are much more cosmetically, I would say, I would again tell you about the continuation after this building. And as usual, we following up with the next building on the right of it. There's really no surprise in that. But the main difference being that it's a corner building. In this whole main street, we have 8 corner buildings, you could say. 2 of them we have already created here, and this will be then our 3rd one. Planet Coaster wise, it's not really that difficult to create it, but it's just a lengthy process. We have to care about there so many different elements, and we suddenly have then there this side alley that will cross this main street. So having said that, it will be quite a lengthy process and we have to split it up in 2 episodes. But once that's done, we can then switch corners and start on the other side of this main street. So as always, let me welcome you back to our real-time section today. Right here I'm in a very distinct perspective that I really enjoy, so we are far away but zoomed in, and this helps tremendously with the effect of the field of view that we are normally used to. And so in that fashion we get a far different look on this park that, at least to me, feels much more calmer and relieving in a way. But apart from that, it's also great for realism. Most area shots that you see online, they are shot from a very high elevation. In the park you have there certain safety regulations that include, of course, a safe airspace where you can't really fly over this park. And so everything that you will see is shot from a very high elevation and then zoomed in, just like we did it also here. And so I assume later on, when we are a lot far in this park, the effect of this perspective change will work wonders here, since you suddenly can feel the distance between all of those different things in the park. Once we have this castle in place, you suddenly realize how big this whole park actually is. I mean, in reality, it feels a lot bigger than it actually is on paper. But once we have then their multiple building arrangements in place, we will get a much better understanding of its scale and distance. Now, this whole discussion leads us in a way very naturally to the topic of how we can present this park in the utmost realistic fashion. When you take a look on the visuals or graphic settings that this game offers to us, you will quickly find out that there is a natural cap of what we can visually display here. But if you would want to go even more realistic beyond that, it was at least previously not really doable or imaginable. I think most people already kinda get where I'm heading here. When you are a little bit more active in the modding community of this game, then you will certainly came across this mod called Sky Studio by Ethereal. Now maybe you have already played it for yourself or watched a recent video of Rudy Renkamel in which he mentioned that, but to quickly get you up to date, it's a graphical mod that allows you to alter the environmental visuals of your park. So from the global illumination, to the lighting, to the shadows, to the mist that you see in the background, or those clouds in the sky that you might want a little bit brighter or darker. And even more on top of that, you can literally change everything of that directly now in this game, and even make presets of that. So I personally have played around quite a bit with this mod, and I can't really tell how useful this is to achieve a extremely realistic look within this game. And maybe the best part about it is that it doesn't have any effect to this save game. So later on, when you want to play this park, it doesn't really matter if you use it now or not. So far, this was always the one thing that made me avoid all other mods, since they had an effect on a save game. And so I'm extremely happy not only to find this mod, but to have this good perspective in mind that you can use it here in a very safe way. Now at the very end of this video, you might ask yourself, well, he's talking the whole time about it, but he doesn't really show it, right? So at least for this episode, this might be true, but from the next episode onwards, I will try to implement now this mod to get even more realism and beauty out of this game. So with having said all those things, I think this will conclude now this episode. As always, if you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like or comment, join as a member on this channel to gain pre-access to the park, join our Discord server, watch my other videos about Anaheim or Orlando, and thank you for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.